Why do I place such emphasis on sources and their importance? Why have we done all this? I have to provide more of a rationale, in part because you're going to go on to other classes where the rationale becomes even more important. Because there are bad sources. That seems obvious. There are bad sources out there that we are trying to avoid. Bad sources that don't give us complete information, that don't help us along the way to our assignment, that maybe give us a quick and dirty solution, but they're really not helpful. Because we want to know more. That's what we want. That's the goal. Too often we have avoided that virtue altogether, and I don't know why. Because some folks don't know what a source is that they're looking at. They don't know, what is it that I'm looking at? Sometimes they'll look at something, think it's a blog, or sometimes they'll think it's an authoritative newspaper account, when in fact it's only a blog. If you don't know what it is, ask. Because in this day and age, everything looks the same, and you can't trust anything that you're taking a look at online unless you actually know what it is. I suppose because some students using bad sources and using them incorrectly to try and support their point, or in ways that are detrimental either to the use of quotations or to explaining why, say, an argument should depend on this particular source. There are lots of ways that students can use sources and can be effective and can be ineffective too. And I'm trying to prevent that. I'm trying to get people off on the right foot. Why do I emphasize sources? Because citation is important. I want to make it a separate part of the assignment where we practice it before we actually do the research paper on the topic that you've chosen. It shouldn't take up my time when we look at your argument. It should be correct or corrected. And I think because it's the natural process of research, we get right into it. I thought this through, and my idea is that we do research really, as it says here, we need to find stuff out. We're interested in a topic. We need to research it from good sources before we give our opinions. Our culture tells us the opposite, that we can just spout off left and right or find a bunch of sources to help support an opinion we've already drawn on a subject. That's the reverse. That's the reverse of the research goal. Any good goal in research wants to be interested in a topic, want to find out all the information I can, all the authoritative information I can about it, want to seek out that authoritative information, and want to learn from that information, from those informative sources. One last analogy. Advisors versus counselors. Which is the better source of information on transfer or graduation? What's my analogy between counselors and advising and sources that we take a look at? I'm trying to draw an analogy here between something that you can find actually on the Inverhill's website. Here you go, counseling and advising. And that's how I found this particular website. Here's Leanne Schmidt helping one of my former students. Leanne Schmidt's one of the counselors on campus. But you say, what's the difference? Counseling and advising, aren't they the same thing? Not really, and I'm not trying to fault any one individual. We have both on our campus, and on most campuses they have counselors and advisors, or varying degrees of naming attendant to varying job descriptions. They're people who help our students. Oftentimes they can help them get to the next class. Let's start with advising. Advisors, not shown here, are folks who are sometimes even students on campus studying for their degree. But they're people who are doing work study, or sometimes people who have a partial degree, and they're usually advising students on the sequence of classes here. They're saying, well, this is the next class in the sequence, here's how you sign up for it, here's how you work the computer. They can give very valuable advice. And counselors. Let's think about what they are. We do have one pictured here, Leanne Schmidt. Counselors are usually folks who already have their degree. They work in the counseling department and can help students, yes, with that class, with the next steps for that class. They can help them with the next class after that class. They can help them with their program. They usually know actually quite a bit, including information about transfer. And I click over here and we can find transfer resources. Click, whoop, there we are. And it'll give you transfer information about all the local colleges and things you'll need actually more generally for transfer out of the school and how to transfer your credits. And the wonderful thing about counselors is that they've been trained to handle almost any circumstance that can come up on campus with students and what they need and the next steps for them. And they've seen all and know all of the teachers and faculty on campus, so they kind of have an idea of the programs and the classes and what's involved with each of those. My point in saying this is that both are essential workers on this campus. Let's go back to our little PowerPoint presentation. Which is the kind of source that you'll go to if you're trying to figure out what the next step for you is in your course load and in your program, in your field of study. Advisors versus counselors. Which is the source that you would turn to try and find that information? It seems like I'm being really mean, but the counselors, of course, have a lot more training, especially if you're thinking about transfer. If you go to advisors, you're going to get information, yes, maybe even good experiential information. I'm not trying to fault them at all. But sometimes the counselors have been here for years. They've made it their life's work to try and help students and get to that next step in their studies and to get that degree. It's really the counselors, and you can see my verbally setting them up as the better source. They are the better source for some of this information, for some of this key information. Can't you see why sources would matter? Sources such as people, and as we know, sources have authors. You can think of advisors and counselors as two different kinds of authors here, two different kinds of sources. Can't we say that some sources really deserve more attention, deserve more focus for our energies when we're studying a subject than others? If our subject was the study at Inver Hills and how to transfer out of Inver Hills and do successfully in our classes and all the rest, wouldn't we really want that counselor to give us advice on how to do that successfully? The counselors, generally speaking, would be the better source to go to. We have advisors on campus, and yes, they will help us to our next class. They're paid less to do so, and I'm not trying to pick on them again. But they're meant to help us get to know the program that we're in already, whereas counselors help us understand why we're in that program in the first place. I think that's a big difference, folks. And if you don't see the difference between those kinds of sources, then I think I need to explain it to you individually. Please seek me out. It's not a lost cause. I can go into more detail as to why some sources are better than others, but I've tried to earnestly explain that it's very important for you to seek out and be curious about sources that will help you in this project that you've got going on. You've got a topic, you're interested in your topic. Show that you're really interested in your topic by choosing the source that's going to help you get to the next step. That is your goal. That is your task before you. Now, make sure that you've done that in your assignment, and you'll do that successfully for the annotated bibliography that you're setting up for me